Tasmania has just in the last hour or so reported its first coronavirus death, taking Australia's death toll to 17. There are now more than 4,000 confirmed cases of coronavirus here, but officials are pointing to a trend downwards in the number of new daily cases and are saying there are early signs that the measures in Australia are working at limiting the spread. The government is expected to unveil a new wage subsidy for businesses and workers affected by the crisis. That's expected to happen later today. Let's get the latest now on today's developments on the coronavirus pandemic. So Tasmania has recorded its first death. The state premier confirmed a woman in her 80s died in the Northwest Regional Hospital this morning. The state government will enforce the new ban on social gatherings of more than 2 people from midnight tonight. The federal government is expected to unveil a new wage subsidy for businesses and workers affected by the coronavirus crisis. It's understood businesses will be paid up to $1,500 a fortnight per employee for the next 6 months. That announcement is expected later today. 3 crew members from the Ruby Princess cruise ship have been taken to a Sydney hospital for treatment. The ship, now anchored off Botany Bay, is at the centre of controversy after passengers were allowed to disembark despite several COVID-19 tests pending. Health authorities in New South Wales have confirmed 127 new coronavirus cases, taking the state's total to 1,918, almost half the national total of around 4,000. But there is hope that the numbers of new cases in the state are stabilising. And Victoria has released its numbers for today as well, and they're substantially down on yesterday. America's leading expert on coronavirus is predicting the pandemic could kill between 100 and 200,000 people in the US. The head of the US task force has serious concerns about the rates of infection, particularly in New York, New Orleans and Detroit. And the UNHRC is worried about the rate of infection in Turkey. There are more than 4 million refugees there, and travel data suggests thousands of people fleeing the worsening situation in Iran flew to Istanbul last month. And the latest data shows that Turkey is on the worst trajectory in terms of the number of cases likely to develop there. So just before we go to our reporter Noor Haider in Canberra to give us the details on what's happening with this wage subsidy plan to be announced later today, might take a look at a few of the latest charts. John Byrne-Murdoch is with Financial Times and he does some really good charts keeping a track on what's happening around the world. And his latest one has just come out this morning. And we were just talking about Turkey then. His chart that's just come out shows Turkey is in the worst position at that particular time. So along the bottom line is the number of days since the 100th case was found. In Turkey, it's about 10 days since then, and they've since found they've got 10,000 cases of coronavirus there. So it's in a worse position than the US. And as we heard, the US, the boss there is expecting, worst case scenario, could be 200,000 deaths in the US. So yeah, deep concern about what could happen with Turkey, especially with the 4 million or so refugees there. And if we look and see where Australia's at, you can see that it appears to be following a line more similar to South Korea now. So we can see that the numbers are falling off a little in Australia. That we don't. The authorities are saying don't be too confident, but you can see there those early signs of hope that the strategies might be working in Australia. And we might just go to the latest ABC story on this as well, because it shows how the cases are falling off. So this on the bottom axis here is the number, just the days of the year, and the vertical axis is the number of cases. So this is the number of new cases declared in Australia per day. So there was a big peak a couple of days ago, 459 new cases for that day. So there was concern then. But the numbers jump around a bit, and as you can see, they've actually been coming down Yesterday there were 344 cases, and that last bar is today, but that's not all the states have declared yet. But New South Wales and Victoria have declared their numbers for today. In New South Wales, it's 127, and as you can see, that's a pretty big drop on yesterday, and especially from 2 days ago. And in Victoria, they've just declared their number of cases for today, and that's 56, and that is a decline from yesterday. So you can see there in those charts the kind of numerical reflection of why there is hope that those strategies in Australia might be working. Okay, so now let's get stuck into this wage subsidy plan that the government is preparing to announce today. Reporter Noor Haider joins us now from Parliament House in Canberra. Noor, g'day. So take us through what's known about this plan.
Well, Joe, as you mentioned, the federal government is expected to announce today a wage subsidy of $1,500 per fortnight per employee over the next 6 months. The idea is to keep as many businesses open and as many people employed as possible. Now, unions and the opposition have been calling for such a measure ever since the UK announced a wage subsidy plan, essentially having the government pay 80% of an employee's wage. Now, the federal government says that an announcement will be coming today. This all forms part of the government's third economic assistance package. And the Treasurer, Josh Frydenberg, says the purpose is to keep as many businesses open and running as possible.
What we have always sought to do is to get Australians to the other side of this crisis, recognising how extraordinary it is and that we're facing two wars two wars at the same time, a health crisis and an economic crisis. And so the announcement today is all about providing additional income support and keeping employees connected to their employer, because once we get to the other side of this, we want the recovery to be as speedy as possible.
And yesterday on another front, the government announced that evictions basically wouldn't be allowed for the next 6 months for tenants in financial strife. How is this actually going to work?
Well, the Prime Minister says that states and territories will be now moving to implement essentially a ban on the evictions of tenants who are facing financial hardship because of the coronavirus crisis. We know that already hundreds of thousands of Australians have become unemployed in the last few weeks alone. And the Prime Minister says more details about this plan will be announced in the coming days. But in the meantime, he's urging tenants to sit down with their landlords and to try and negotiate. He says he wants banks to also be helping in this situation. Now, as I mentioned earlier, a third economic assistance package is in the works, and addressing rental stress forms part of that. The government has been talking about a so-called hibernation plan, a plan to stop businesses accruing further debt, and we expect that further announcements will be made about addressing the stress that commercial tenants face when they're not getting money through the door. Listen, here's the Prime Minister speaking earlier last night.
This is part of the hibernation approach, where we want people, bespoke, customised to their own circumstances, to sit down and work these things out. There's no rule book for this. We are in uncharted territory, but the goal should be shared, and that is a business that can reopen on the other side, not weighed down by excessive debts because of rental arrears. A landlord that has a tenant so they can continue into the future to be able to support the investments that they have made.
And Noor, for people sitting at home this morning thinking, okay, what can I and what I cannot do today, because this kind of has changed over the last couple of weeks, what's the latest on what people are allowed to do?
Well, Joe, last night the National Cabinet decided to limit the number of people allowed in outdoor and indoor gatherings to a maximum of 2 people. Now, this rule won't apply to people within the same household. So a family of 5, for example, can still go out for a walk together. It also doesn't apply in the context of weddings or funerals. The pre-existing rules around that still apply. So a maximum of 5 people at a wedding and 10 people at a funeral applies. Now, the Prime Minister Minister says it will be left to the states and territories to try to decide if they will enforce this rule. We know that Victoria will be doing so. We heard some strong comments from the New South Wales Premier Gladys Berejiklian earlier today saying that as of midnight tonight, New South Wales will begin policing that. So people can expect penalties or fines if they are found to be gathering in groups of more than two. And in addition to that, the government has announced or is urging all Australians not to leave their home unless it is absolutely necessary. So that means if you're going to buy essential goods from the supermarket, you can. And if you're seeking medical care, you can. And if you're going to work or going outside to exercise, that is appropriate. But other than that, people are being told to stay at home. Now, in addition to that, outside gyms and skate parks and playgrounds will be closed as of today, and everyone aged over 70 is being told to limit going outside as much as possible. For Indigenous Australians, anyone aged over 50 is being told to self-isolate as well.
Okay, Noor, so that key media conference for today will be the Prime Minister announcing this wage plan, presumably be the Prime Minister and the Treasurer. Is there any indication on likely timing of that, even morning or afternoon? Because we'll be keen to broadcast that.
Well, Joe, at this stage, we do not have a time for that press conference. The Treasurer, Josh Frydenberg, did indicate in speaking on News Breakfast earlier this morning that there will be a major announcement coming today, but the time yet hasn't been revealed.
Yeah. Okay, Noor Hader reporting there from Canberra.